Okay, one very important interview question. What are some governor limits? This is a place where you should be confident, and you should not be allowed yourself to be tricked, or to be you should not be caught unawares over here. So basically there are some governor limits. So like for each of this is for a transaction. Okay, there is a transaction limit. At the top you will see like say for SOQL queries. So how many SOQL queries a transaction can do? As I told you before also, there are some videos we said a transaction is a block of transaction. Like if you have written a code controller, okay, we say so that once you click a button and call a code, that is a transaction. Or if you're working on a list of records, okay, a trigger as calling a list of records, and that is one transaction. Okay, so these are relevant for one transaction. So from one Apex method, but sometimes you may call multiple queries can be issued. So there is a limit to that. I have seen lines where people write up to 7,000 lines of code, which is required for requirement. So in that times you have to be very careful. So how many SOQL queries you can do is you can in a synchronous limit you have 100, and in asynchronous we have 200. What is synchronous, asynchronous, we'll just see at the end. So total number of queries that can be retrieved is 50,000, and in asynchronous also is 50,000. Now the interview may dip deeper and say, no, I want 3 lakh records to be queried. So in that you have to start using your logic and say, like say for example my UI itself will show only 3,000 records, sir. So how will I why would you want a requirement? What is the requirement for that? For that you can say you can go and use database.querylocator or some other. Whereas when we are writing a form, or when we are writing a trigger, or when we are writing a controller, we will not work with 3 lakh records. But if the interview insists, no, I want to fetch 2 lakh records, I want to show some records. So what you will say is I will use something like pagination. Okay, pagination is you can select a n number of records. Like say you can select 40,000 records, and then when you click next, you can go for the next query and select the next. And then another thing you can say is I can add more var clauses to reduce the records returned to the relevant record. And using pagination and these combinations, I can try to achieve your goal of getting 3 lakhs. But ideally I would like to optimize my queries to reduce the number of queries. So you should be confident when you answer these questions. Anyway, so SOSL queries is 20. Total number of records by a single SOQL 2000. Now the very important one is the last one, total number of DML statements issues, 150. We have already seen that in the DML database slides. If you have not seen that, please go back and see that database transaction slide. So what happens is if you loop through, if you create objects, and like for an account, if you create insert account, if you create an account and say insert 150 times, it will hit a governor limit. Okay, so instead of that, what we do is we generally create a list, right? When we initialize one object, add a value to it, and then put it into the list. Then when it goes into a loop, that way we keep on adding values into a list. So all the new accounts, suppose you create 300 accounts, so all those accounts one by one will be created and added to the list of accounts. You will not do a direct insert. So finally when you have created all your records and added it account records and added it to the list, then you will do one final database.insert or an insert of the list, correct? So what will happen is that will go, and just because it's just one DML, right? So the entire list will get inserted or updated. So that is how you can bypass this governor limit. You can use list inserts to bypass governor limit. So what you will say, once again I'll repeat, you will initialize an account, put it in a for loop, and the initialized values will fill the fields, account name, etc. And then you will not do an insert of the account, you will add it to the list. Okay, like that, how much ever records you want, and then outside the for loop you will do one final insert or an update. So that is how you overcome governor limits. So the SOQL and the DML statements are important, and SOQL queries, this is where you may find some questions, and these are the answers that you should confidently say. Now how do you avoid governor limits? First is you have to write proper transactions. These are usually affect transactions. I told you, when you save a form data, insert, update a list of records from anywhere, from your controller or somewhere, then you have to be aware of these things. Do not write DMLs inside loops. There is a chance that it will hit the governor limit. Do not write SOQLs. There is a chance that it will hit the SOQLs inside the loop. And try to use the database.insert of list. As I told you, use bulkified coding concepts. This is again covered previous video. Please go through it, otherwise this will help avoid the 150 DMLs governor limit. And in case of large data sets, if you want to fetch, you can use pagination. I'll use more selective clause to avoid this governor limits. Next we will look at synchronous and asynchronous.